Now on this video, I'm going to try to show how to assemble and install the master cylinder on a Suzuki GS 1100E 1982. Now, even though this is unrelated to the evil twin project that we're working on, I wanted to show this. This is a pretty funny little part. We're working on two projects at the same time. The risers, of course, made the key about an inch further away from the surface, and I wanted to make this custom little key. I'm going to go see if that fits for the first time. I rode the bike, and you had to really reach in to get the key. Well, I'm hoping this is going to solve the problem. But it's the master cylinder swap out day today. Now again, this is part 7 of the evil twin project, and between polishing and cleaning and prepping up things for this project, we've done quite a lot of work on this bike in the last couple of weeks. But all little things that, well, I'm happy that I can share them. Maybe you'll enjoy the changes. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you won't. Maybe I'll learn something. Never can tell with these projects. So step 1, after we've got done polishing this the other day, and this was it's the video before this, and we're coming up on having 1,100 videos out there, all dealing with motorcycle issues. And there's about 1,000 model airplane videos too. So altogether we have over 2,000 videos. Now, I always like to, even though I've flushed this and cleaned it, I always like to get in the corners. And of course we're going to flush out and put in all new brake fluid. Now the reason for updating this is just because the evil twin project, we're in the middle of taking some of the parts from our donor bike, and I wanted to polish this. This is polished a lot nicer than the one that's on there. The one that's on there was just a rough polish, but this will be a nice little upgrade, and this will be part 7 of the evil twin project. Look at that, I can see my face. Look at that beautiful face, wow. Oh, that's not me. It's a mouse. Now, in many master cylinders you have this little switch on the bottom, and what I'm going to do is very carefully, this comes off with 2 little Phillips screws, and there's a little spring in there and a little piece that moves back and forth. I want to do that very carefully out in the garage, and it's really cold out there, so I want to be real careful about it. This is all clean. We're ready to get out there and get started. Now I want to use the new boot. The boot that's on the evil twin right now is gouged up. This is a much better condition, and that's the whole idea of the evil twin project, is to get these parts updated, polished, whatever. This is the little piece that has to go in here, and it's a little tricky. It's got a little spring before I take the old one out. I had the choice of using the new brake line, but then I've got other issues I don't want to deal with. So what I'm going to do when I install this is just break it here. It'll make bleeding the brakes a lot easier. This nothing is assembled here nice and tight. Everything is loose. I want to show the method I use for getting the old one off, getting a new one on, and always be very, very careful putting towels on everything so you don't get any brake fluid on the paint. So now that I'm out in the tundra, I wanted to try my little extended key here. See if this works. See, this really was too low. It was just inconvenient. Very good. Now, as I said, this is part 7 of the evil twin project, and we do have a spare bike, which allows us things like, and this is polished up, but it's not really a good job. See, it's not polished around the edges here, and this part here is all chewed up. So what I'm trying to do little by little by little, every time I have some time, is take parts off. That's why I call it the evil twins. Parts off of this bike, polish them, replace them, swap them out. We've done several so far, and we've polished some engine parts, valve cover. We're going to do some more before the year is out. I'm sure we have another couple of months of really brutal cold weather here, and it's cold out here right now. And boy, I like to mention on every video that when I got this bike, Ray and I went down to Philadelphia. We paid almost no money for this bike because it didn't run. It had a leaky seal on one side of the engine. Actually needs a crankshaft rebuild. But I never had any idea how many parts I could take off it. And in a time like this, how many upgrades I've done to this bike from what amounts to be my little, Luciano calls it a Christmas tree bike. You run over and take the ornaments off. And I think he's right. So I got to shuffle things around here, and it's time to swap out that master cylinder. Relatively simple job, but I think there's some tips you can pick up. So I'm going to try to do this very methodically. Number one, remove the mirror. That gets that out of the way. Now I just got to mention something. It's below 20 degrees out here right now. A quartz heater like this, I've had this one over 20 years, and if you've never had a quartz heater, it allows you, it doesn't make it fun and comfortable, but it allows you to do work in an unheated garage. And it's not an air heater. This is not heat air. It heats things. So if you put your foot here, what happens? It heats your foot, not the air in between. And as I try to say every time I work around brake fluid, cover the bike with old towels. I never go to a garage sale without buying every old towel they have. I've got plenty, because once they get brake fluid or gas or diesel fuel on them, right in the garbage. Now, it's to our advantage. I have to pull this rubber boot off. In this case, it's wired on. I want to remove this boot. I'm going to have to use a heat gun to take it off because it's not going to slide past the banjo. So that's number one. Then what I'm going to try to do, and I'm going to do it very carefully, I want to break this union, and while this is still in place, it's going to drip brake fluid. I'll put a paper towel in there, and I'm going to try to hook this line right to the new master cylinder. So this will give me, it's not going to be full of brake fluid, but what it's going to be is the line will still have brake fluid, and it'll just make bleeding it a lot easier. And the reason is this, to bleed the brakes on a GS, there's 4 brake fittings. It's really a complicated thing to bleed it. Of course, we'll do it in the end, but this just will make it a little bit easier. Now here's a good tip. It just makes the job easier. Before you loosen these 2 nuts, this is solidly mounted. It's a good idea to break this nut free. Just break it free, just enough. Ooh, doesn't have to be that it's leaking. We're going to replace the aluminum washer anyway. And once you break the union, you're going to get a couple of drops coming out of here, and if you don't have a towel around, it could get on some of your paint work or the things you don't want it to get on. So now here's the easy part. I've got to heat this with a heat gun and get this off and put the new one on. Just replace it. So now using a little hair dryer heat, I want to warm this all up. I want to warm the rubber part up. I want that to slide right on there. See, the idea, this is a delicate part. I don't want to rip it. I don't want to chew it up. A little bit of heat, especially in this tundra here. Come on, baby. Oh, come on. Don't give me a hard time. Again, I don't want to force it. That's the whole idea of the heat. And why I wanted to show this as a tip. There it goes. If you warm these parts, it just seems to slide right on a little better. Even though you probably could put some, I don't want to put any WD-40 or anything on there. That's for sure. Okay, now this is on. Now I want to get a brand new washer. Let me make sure I get a brand new one. This is ready. This is ready. Okay, so now I can just swap this out. It's relatively easy to do this. And I will not make the parts tight. The parts will not be tightened up. The reason is I have to get this switch working. I have to get all those little parts in there too as the next step. It's tricky, but there's certainly no part of this that just hand tight is fine. A little more than hand tight will be fine for this. Make sure this, yeah, it's in the right direction. Okay, well, now we're ready to take this off. Now this is a job I always do, no gloves, and I'll show you why. This is not there's a little switch going to jump out of here, and if it falls on the floor, there's a little spring and everything. It can be annoying if you drop it on the floor, and you got to climb around like a reptile for a half an hour. So what I always try to do is get my bare hands under there and try to catch all the little parts as they come out. In this case, because they have grease on them, they've stuck up in there, which is good. That's good because now I can loosen this. I can pull that whole part away. Now this is possibly the hardest part of the whole job. There's these little tiny screws, and when you drop them on the floor, but all these parts that are in here, they're tiny. And whenever I've tried to do it with gloves, it's got to pay the price. Now what happens in this really cold weather like this, sometimes my hands stick to the tools. You ever stick your tongue to an ice cube when you're a kid? Well, that's what happens to your hands. Okay, so you have this little cover. You have this little switch, which is going to go easy, easy, easy. Okay, and then the part that goes back and forth comes out, and you can see that's the part we have to deal with right now. That's very, very, very tiny and delicate. Now with the switch totally in the right place, the wires routed correctly, I can snug these two bolts up to keep this from moving while I do the brake fluid. I can snug this up. I don't have to super tighten it, just tight enough that it's not dripping fluid for right now. Because at the very end of this, I may want to break this just to bleed the brake here at the very end if I can't get the last little bit of air out. Now we're going to ultimately at the end of this job flush out all the old brake fluid. So I'm going to start by dropping the cap. Filling it up. Now what I want to do is I want to just let it sit for a second. Get this line in the position it's in. I can snug this up now. Not ultimately super tight. It's a real treat having fresh, clean brake fluid in the system. So sometimes the stuff that comes out is as brown as like when you change the oil. Now worth mentioning, because we're going to have to bleed the brakes every time you get the system open to air, it's just a good idea to bleed it. Manual, of course, tells you, and there's a specific way that you bleed them. From the left side, this is the first one, then the second one, then from the right side, third and fourth. And I've done that many, many times, of course, when I've had taken the brake system apart. You really have to follow this to the letter of the law. Now, at the end of the bleeding operation, I want to make sure I have a nice solid lever, of course. Oh, that's nice. And because it's so time consuming, I wanted to make a separate video about bleeding brakes. And I wanted to, and maybe I can get, this might be a choice for the future, Bob Navola, who's an expert at making brake lines and steel lines and making his own parts and whatever. I'd like to get him over, and maybe the two of us, we could do a brake bleed down together. This way I got somebody to hold the camera too, and he could show us some of the tricks he's learned. Since he is an expert, I always like to defer to experts. I can do this stuff, but Bob knows a lot more than I do. Anyway, we got a nice solid lever. I'll get the heat gun out, put the boot back on, tighten everything up. Wow. That's going to add a nice little touch to the bike. And all that's left here, very simple. Put the mirror back on. Make sure everything's snug. I always put a little piece of safety wire on that rubber boot. Always use heat. Warm that boot up. It's a very delicate thing, and it's in keeping with the bike. I think that's a part that just belongs on the bike. Now, I always say everybody's taste and what constitutes a custom motorcycle, a personalized motorcycle, everybody's got different tastes. I have my own little set of values and things I like. Doing the work on the bikes kind of individualizes them. I like to do it myself. I like to do it with a reasonable budget. And I like to, in some way, and this is the big one, I like to share it with my friends who also share this passion for motorcycles that we all have. And this is, I guess this is going to be one of the projects on the Evil Twin that we're done with now. And I will get Bob Navola to try to come over and do a dedicated thing on bleeding the brakes, even though we did it today. It would make this video too long, I think. And these videos, I know, I can hear you saying, yeah, right. But anyway, that is a nice little upgrade. That's something that, like, it fits all the things I like in a custom touch of a motorcycle. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and all of the ones from the Evil Twin. The Evil Twins. Boy, these really are the Evil Twins. And thanks for watching. And now the best part of every day. Getting inside, getting a cup of coffee. Oh, you evil twins, you have made it a cold winter. Hey again, thanks for watching.